The sad thing is that, there are some technocrats, there are some experts who are appreciating dictators as far as they give, this development lip service. I mean, I like this quotation, I like what you're doing, but there are some other experts who are calling, for example, the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi a benevolent leader.
Yeah.
So why even experts who are learned, who are exposed to democracy, justice and freedom, still appreciate dictators?
Yeah, well, it's a very, the debate between dictatorship and a democratic system has been there in the development literature for decades. What differentiates China from Ethiopia? I know China fairly well. I have been there 10 times. I was there in 1977 when I was a government official in Ethiopia. I worked there a number of times, setting up their office, the World Bank's office, talking to people, recruiting people, training people, and so on. The difference is the Chinese leadership is nationalist. It's supremely Chinese. It wants to compete. It doesn't want to be dependent on anybody. They used foreign aid carefully and systematically to liberate the pillars of the economy so that it becomes Chinese. Why is China today the largest economy in the world, exceeding in terms of GDP the United States? Why? I mean, this is in a few decades, right? Okay. Why is Vietnam, as I said, a country that used to import rice to feed its population, one of the biggest exporters of rice and coffee? They are not a coffee producer. They are one of the largest coffee producers in the world.
So now what you're saying is that even if there are dictators, yes, let's say like South Korea, yeah, China, right, Vietnam, and so on, they were dictators, but yeah, they had national vision to, yes, rally all stakeholders that they could be able to come out of, yes, poverty. Yeah. So now, even if we tolerate dictatorship, yeah, in Ethiopia, the government in Ethiopia doesn't have the national vision, no, to bring people together, because they have this few elite people, right, who promotes ethnic division, right, so that they may continue to lead in Ethiopia. Right. As far as you divide people, yeah, as far as you cannot have a national vision, yeah, it's impossible for a dictatorship to help and transform the country into prosperity. That's really very important, because some of the government leaders and also some of the supporters of the government, they are arguing that, hey, don't just focus on the human rights record of the government. Don't claim that there are a few people from the same ethnic group leading the country and so on. They say that, hey, give us time. Give us the government time. They will succeed to transform Ethiopia from poverty into prosperity. Yeah. But they are mistaken, because the government in Ethiopia, not only dictatorial, not only they abuse human rights, they don't have a national vision. No. They couldn't be able to bring people together. If people don't come together, no, if they don't have a vision, right, how can they own the development agenda of the government? Yeah. How can they sacrifice their talent, their time, their resources, right, to contribute for development? Because a few leaders, right, cannot transform a country.
Right. Just let's stay on that point. What is the evidence that what you said is accurate? What's the evidence? There is ample evidence. For example, you look at income, per capita income. Ethiopia's per capita income today is about $500 per year. 1/3, less than 1/3 of the sub-Saharan African average. When I was growing up, the per capita income was about 100. It has gone up 4 times. But what is the purchasing power of that money? Even if we acknowledge that it has grown, what is the purchasing power? The value of the dollar, the birr, has gone down severely. Inflation in 2011 was 40%. Now it's 15%. The government says 15%. But how many people are able to buy clothes, food, have enough to eat, have medical care, and so on? We need to ask that question. It's not about the tiny minority that's becoming rich. I admit that the phenomenal growth that the World Bank talks about. By the way, there is even a dispute about the phenomenal growth, double-digit growth. It's not true. It may be half, 5%. Even that's good. That's good. But at the end of the day, what we should do is measure it against the well-being of the population. Why are Ethiopians flooding the Saudi market, the Gulf market? Why are young Ethiopians leaving the country? 70 people, just a few weeks ago, 70 young people were taking an unworthy boat, right? Many of them died, right? Why? Why would they leave their country? Why did Ethiopian physicians from 1991 to 2006 or something, out of 3,700 trained doctors, 3,000 of them left? Why did they leave? So you can train doctors, you can train other people. If the country environment is not conducive to live a comfortable life, if there is poverty around you, overwhelming poverty, you can say, yeah, there is growth, there are a few millionaires, I admit. Of course, when you have an elite-led system, when the development system is not people-based, when there is no balance of checks and balances, when there are no institutions that say you cannot do this, then the result is a very skewed system. Poverty deepens. I'll just end with one because I have taken more minutes than I should. There was a conversation at the World Bank, and there is a paper that was written, and one World Bank official who didn't want to be quoted anonymously said the following, I'm paraphrasing. He said, under Haile Selassie, the Italians built roads. Haile Selassie was able to maintain state control because of those roads. The current government is getting huge billions of dollars of aid and is building infrastructure, is building roads. But as a result, is able to control the society. That's what it says. I'm not disputing the fact that the EPRDF is doing a good job of building roads. You can build all the roads in the world. It's very easy for you to control the society that way. But at the end of the day, what kind of productivity do we have? Is agriculture growing? Is the middle class expanding? Are poor people becoming richer in the rural areas? The Ethiopian economy is virtually stuck. Without radical reform, it can't eliminate poverty. Ethiopia is more dependent today, as I said. It's aid dependent. It's the largest aid dependent country. Emergency food year after year after year. The Ethiopian government buys $1.1 billion of food from Canada and from the US each year. So are you telling me that what commercial farmers like Alamudi produce and sell to Saudi Arabia is feeding the Ethiopian people? No. No. It is a very skewed and distorted model of development. Amartya Sen's comment that no farming takes place in a democratic society because governments are accountable to their people is correct. Yeah, it's true. You know?
So now you're saying that even the governance system itself or the vision they have, the developmental state, these internal factors do not favor the government to eradicate poverty?
No.
So what is the difference between countries like developmental countries like in the Asian countries and Ethiopia?
Yeah.
What's the main difference that cannot help the government to become a developmental?
That's a good question. In the case of, for example, there was a study done in the case of Vietnam, in the case of Thailand. Land is owned privately by those who produce. I remember a case study in Vietnam. One farmer the land was owned by the state before the reform. One farmer was so capable of producing more and selling more, he was able to send his child to a school at Harvard for graduate school. A farmer, imagine. In Ethiopia, there are, of course, model farmers, we are told. Under Meles, you remember, every year there were model farmers and all that. So fundamentally, the land ownership, title to land ownership, to land tenure must be guaranteed. There must be extension services. Smallholders should be empowered. Investment should be done in smallholder. India achieved the Green Revolution, and productivity through state intervention. The World Bank and others contribute. Why wouldn't we have an Ethiopian smallholder revolution? Why wouldn't the government invest heavily in fertilizer plants and reduce the cost of fertilizers?
Do you think that Ethiopia can become like other states, can fight poverty and come out without being dependent on food aid?
I have absolutely no doubt if the governance system changes, and as you said rightly, if it becomes inclusive, if there is competition, if all Ethiopians are involved. I'm not talking, look, involvement, participation is absolutely fundamental. The poor have rights. Food is a human right. In order to achieve it, people should participate. They should own something. Ethiopians are very creative, hardworking. You see yourself. You see everybody in the West. You see many people, during Haile Selassie's time, if I take you back, during Haile Selassie's time, I remember there was an agricultural revolution. Graduates of Alamaya, police officers, militaries, colonels, and so on went to Setitomara, transformed it into a bread basket. They were exporting sesame, RC, and other areas where there was really a revolution in agricultural productivity. That's a model. If Ethiopians have a tradition, and that, by the way, one of the things, Dr. Assegid, that I like to remind the audience is, if you don't have peace, you will not have sustainable development. So Ethiopia has not had peace. Under Haile Selassie, there was a revolution. Under the Derg, there was a revolution. Under this system, there is conflict everywhere, practically everywhere. So you need to have peace. In order to have peace, you need to have harmony among the population. You can't ethnically polarize the society and expect a different outcome. You can't control the peasantry for political reasons and say, well, we'll keep the peasantry because the peasantry is okay. It's producing. It's not true. If it's producing, Ethiopia will not be food aid dependent year after year after year. For that not to occur, there has to be the kind of model of really representative kind of governance, accountability, participation by the poor, education of girls, inputs by the government, really enabling, leveling the playing field. Creating an environment where productivity is a norm rather than an exception. Today we talk about exception in Ethiopia. Exception, we have millionaires. Oh my God, there is glitz in growth. Oh my God, there are buildings. My God, what about the core issue of what you asked earlier? Poverty and destitution. My parents lived in a shelter, in a straw hut. Most Ethiopians today live in a straw hut. I was this is 40 years ago.
Everything is the same.
What happened? You said it, thank you. What existed in 1984, at least that much I remember, what existed in 1984 in terms of the structure, the policy, remains the same as far as the agricultural sector and the rural population is concerned.
So this is time to sit down and revise and change your ways.
Yes.
You should not pursue the same path knowing that it hasn't delivered anything. So let's push it a little bit further about whether it's possible to eradicate poverty without being dependent on food aid. Now there is a dialogue, there is a debate between experts. For example, Dambisa Moyo, she argues that it's possible. Food aid is not helping the poor. It's not helping. Even she wrote a book called Red Aid. And she argues that poor countries, they should be notified that in 5 years there won't be any food aid program.
Right.
Now, some other experts like Jeffrey Sachs and also Bill Gates, they laughed at her and they said it's impossible for these countries to come out of poverty without food aid.
Yeah.
What's your thought on
that? Well, I think it's really demeaning to Africans. If the models in East Asia, the successful models in East Asia didn't come by miracle. It's not God made. It's human made. It's system made. Countries with less resources, like Korea, have become among the most prosperous nations on the planet. With education, agricultural productivity, of smallholder, farming, booming. Vietnam has done it, as I mentioned before. So a systems issue requires a system solution. You can't solve Ethiopia's intractable poverty with the current model. You can't. It's impossible. No matter how much aid you get, you will see 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, unless the structure of the economy, unless the policy. It means at the end of the day, it's political participation by the population. It's fair play. The regulatory system has to be, empowering. It can be done for the following reasons. Ethiopia can achieve not only food self-sufficiency, but it can actually be a net exporter of grain, and textile products and other things.
So you're saying that we could be able to come out of poverty without dependent on food aid. So let's move on the solution part. So now how can we fix this problem? What do you think should be done to transform this issue and make it possible that the poor benefit from the current food aid, and ultimately how can Ethiopia come out of poverty?
Fair question. Dambisa Moyo's comment about debt aid is right in the sense that you need to find other mechanisms of financing development that empower your productivity, domestic productivity. Aid as a perpetual model of intervention in the economy is not really a panacea. It has never been anywhere in the world.
So what are the solutions? What are
the solution is one, as I said, smallholder revolution. The population, the rural population is absolutely critical. You need to empower them. You need to liberate people from dependency on food aid. You need to create an environment where inputs are not politicized. If you support me, I will give you fertilizer. That's really, can you imagine developing a country through political control? It's not possible. You need to actually industrialize agriculture. You need to have an outlet for the 2 million people who move from the rural areas to the urban areas. How do you do that? How did Vietnam do that? How did Thailand do that? How did the miracle economies in East Asia do that? How did the Chinese do that? By creating industries, by industrializing. When the tragedy in Ethiopia is, we believe, the Ethiopian government really actually believes that it can develop the country by invitation of foreigners. It's impossible. If you invite, instead of developing Ethiopians, instead of empowering them, either through cooperatives or individuals, empower them. They can do it. They can do it.
But are you against foreign direct investment?
No. Foreign direct investment without Ethiopian participation is a disaster. That I can tell you. The bad Samaritans that a book on globalization without democracy, without local dominance, without protecting local industries, without enabling them to flourish, to emerge, is a disaster. That has been written over and over again. Korea didn't develop only by giving everything out by foreign direct investment. It's by participation. Small industry like Samsung emerged. They were small, but they were protected by the government. A nationalist government always has a bias in favor of domestic productivity. I would do that. I would empower local industry. I would invest in local industry. I would make sure that agriculture and the rural economy and the urban economy are linked. Those are the kinds of intervention. At the end of the day, you need an open system. You need a competitive system. You need accountability. You need the rule of law. These are not mere words. These are real.
Yeah, so now the international community, the donor organizations, they should, rather than just giving food, they should also find some alternatives to support the development efforts of developing countries. And as you say, governments like the Ethiopian government should have a broader approach in terms of developing, starting from having a national vision and empowering the poor and so on and so forth. Now let's talk about other stakeholders. For example, what should be the role of celebrities? Now they are at the center, promoting food aid, like film stars, music stars, and so on. Do you think that they are the key stakeholders, or they should change their role and become supporters or facilitators rather than to be, the evangelists of food aid?
I think the most important advocates should be Ethiopians. Yeah, they should be in the forefront. It's not the colonial period now, it's the 21st century. Why wouldn't we create vision? Why wouldn't we offer alternatives, saying then the world community should really follow? The script should be ours. It should no longer belong to celebrities. Celebrities should be catalysts, helpers, rather than leaders. And I think Oxfam put it very well. Oxfam said in its review, 25 years after 1984, after Bandit, and now 30 years, the thing was written, 5 years ago, they said, give outs are not a solution. Food aid is not emergency food aid is not a solution. What then is a solution? The solution is to really liberate the productivity of smallholders in Ethiopia. Is to really bring in a new culture of improving productivity, new tools, new mindset, opening the markets, connecting farmers to markets, and that's the kind of thing that will really result in a revolution. That's what they say. Celebrities can help us not by celebrating our poverty, but by saying, look, you need to change. I mean, the recent, Dr. Assegid recently wrote a fabulous piece critiquing 48 governments. One of them is Ethiopia. Ethiopia's problem is intractable as long as there is no reform, radical reform. It means political reform. It means economic reform, financial reform, agricultural reform. These reforms are fundamental. The celebrities like Geldof and Bono, instead of celebrating greets, of course there are buildings being built in Addis Ababa. We know that, But instead of saying that, look, the fundamental issue of governance, the fundamental issue of participation, the fundamental issue of ownership of land. Who owns Ethiopia today, Dr. Assegid?
The government.
The government.
A few people.
A few people.
A few people cannot transform the country. By the way, I want to bring the idea of William. You already know William Easterly. He even criticized the celebrities' efforts.
Yes.
They should have been catalysts, as you say, but they should not undermine the issue of human rights, freedom, and so on, because without making people free to think freely, they cannot innovate. Yeah. They cannot fight poverty, and we cannot fight poverty at all without freedom, because free people can only free themselves from poverty. Yeah. So we need. So my next question is: what about the role of the diaspora, for example? How can they shape this thing? Do you think Ethiopian in the diaspora Are they, should they be critical players, like in terms of advocating, for example, how the current food aid program is not working, how they should, as you earlier mentioned, that how can they approach congressmen, senators, and other decision makers to help change the situation and help the poor to benefit from the current developmental aid program? What kind of things do you think the diaspora should do?
This reaction in Ethiopia among the people and also even the government sort of parading the idea the diaspora is useless. It just simply all echoes and shouts and it doesn't know what the hell it's doing and all that stuff. And that they don't have the knowledge or resources. That's what the government propagates now. It tried to persuade the diaspora to participate, to buy it, to support the government by selling remittance, by sending remittance, by buying bonds, by building houses and all that stuff. That, unfortunately, is not going to take us anywhere anyway.
Why?
Because you can't, we're talking about 100 million people. We're not talking about the lives of 100,000 people or 500,000 people. We're talking about empowering and liberating and freeing 100 million people from destitution. If that is the case, it's a systems issue. A systems issue cannot be eradicated by the diaspora. It is people who would have to participate. They have to say, no, we cannot accept destitution. We can't accept shame, because dependency on food aid is a shame, as I said earlier. Therefore, the diaspora can really help by propagating the idea that food aid is not helping Ethiopia. In fact, the aid architecture should be governed by the respect of human rights. Otherwise, it will create millionaires, a few of them, elites, and it will not change the fundamental structure of the economy at all.
So the food aid program should be administered at the local level by charitable organizations, non-profit
independent
organizations who don't have any political agenda.
Yeah. In addition to that, the development aid should be linked directly to human rights, to the Ethiopian government's respect of human rights. If you don't have human rights, as Human Rights Watch has documented over and over again, especially the pivotal study of freedom, development without freedom. I mean, that is a pivotal study. What it says is you can't use aid as an instrument to control, to deny, to punish. That's what the Ethiopian government is doing. You know how much money we have lost through corruption and illicit outflow? $30 billion. 30.
Since when?
Since the TPLF took political power.
23 years.
Yeah. I'm talking about corruption and illicit outflow. Meles, before he died, had identified that as a danger. If we don't watch out, we are going to give up the pillars of the economy to foreigners. That's what he said. If you keep that money and invest it locally, you generate employment. You revolutionize agriculture, right? So I think the diaspora can insist, as I said, you go to church, we go to church, all of us go to church or to a worship place, a place of worship, a mosque, whatever it is. We can campaign to make sure that aid is really linked to human rights, to the advancement of the elimination of poverty. Food aid there should be a red line to stop food aid. You can't perpetually, because what you are doing is giving ammunition to the Ethiopian government not to produce. That's what you are doing. Ethiopia buys $1.1 billion of wheat every year. Why wouldn't Ethiopians produce that? They can produce it. If Alamudi can produce 1 million tons of rice and give it to Saudi Arabia, sell it to Saudi Arabia, Ethiopians can produce the same amount of wheat or sorghum or teff. Whatever is consumed locally can be produced, right? That land should belong to Ethiopians, not to Karaturi, not to Alamudi. Alamudi is serving the business interests of Saudi Arabia. He's feeding Saudi society. What about Ethiopians feeding Ethiopian society? That's really the dilemma we have. So each member of the diaspora has a moral responsibility. Look, what ESAT is doing. ESAT is doing a public service by informing the Ethiopian people because they don't have an alternative. They are given figures that are absolutely absurd. Growth, glitz. Ethiopia is booming. Why are you joking? Why are Ethiopians leaving their country in droves? 90% of the population is poor.
Yeah, by the way, you're right, because the diaspora can play a critical role. Especially they can use this kind of debates and information from experts like yourself. They can use the video or part of the video to promote and also show the international community is that the food aid program is not benefiting the poor. There must be change, and also they should be armed. This discussion is very important to advocacy organizations and also individuals because they are now well informed. They know the problem, they know what's going on, and also they know the alternatives, the solutions. So they have to use this kind of information, the video, the content, thanks to ESAT. Then now they have this promotional material. So I'm glad that you have been here giving us these great information. I appreciate it. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, first, I appreciate what you did. This conversation, give and take, is really wonderful. Second, I honestly believe in Ethiopia's ability to achieve food self-sufficiency with the right government, with the right leadership. Leadership matters. Government matters, institutions matter, empowerment matter. These are not jokes. Ethiopia is called the water tower of Africa, right? We have ample lands. It is really a tragedy for us in the 21st century to depend on US aid for food, on import of food, while we are giving our land to Karuturi to produce food to sell to India. It doesn't make sense. It is a logic that has no merit in development. You can't be a dictator. I don't care. But be a benevolent dictator, a good dictator. Don't kill. Don't jail. I mean, everybody who opposes the regime is jailed. It makes no sense.
Journalists, just people who viewed the decency.
Yeah, because the government doesn't want the truth to be revealed. It just doesn't make sense. So if you are confident in the system you have built, be confident enough to allow people to express their views. Be confident enough to say, hey, political competition, come on. Let's do it. Economic competition, fair enough. No elitism, no effort. The effort company, by the way, which started with zero capital, owns billions. How come? How come hard-working Ethiopians who can develop our country? I'll just end with something. I remember going to Kenya, when I was working for the Ethiopian government, and one Kenyan observer told me and the finance minister at that time and another person, I'm so proud of you Ethiopians, he said. I said, why? Because you own your own land, your own country. That's what he said.
That's not the case now.
That's not the case now. Who owns Ethiopia? That is the question I like to plant to listeners. Who owns Ethiopia? Who runs Ethiopia? Who is a millionaire in Ethiopia? How come we are still poor and food aid dependent? Why? How come we are not saving money?
And we have to ask these questions.
Yes.
And find solutions, answers, and we have to contribute our share.
Yes.
Dr. Aklog, thank you very much on behalf of ESAT and our viewers.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Dear viewers, I hope that you have enjoyed our discussion. It was about why the current food aid and development aid programs are not benefiting the poor in Ethiopia. Dr. Aklog and myself, we debated about questions on why, what, and how. This is my belief that you have learned something. If you are a technocrat, now you have some ideas on how to influence the system. If you are an advocacy organization leader, now you have some contents. You can use that to influence decision makers, international donors, and so on. This is my hope that we could be able to eradicate poverty, and food aid and development aid programs finally benefit the poor, who should come out of poverty because they are the key stakeholders. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to chat with you with another program in the future.